In the name of God, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. Please be seated. So it's summer, and the living is easy. Or at least it's supposed to be. Well, the days are slower and a little bit easier. The nights are warm, very, very warm, and sweet. The earth is filled with the sound of the music of birds during the day and the sound of crickets and frogs at night. There are crashing thunder and lightning storms, sun-soaked beach days, and barbecues and pool parties with family and friends. Most of us even get to take a little time off from work as a vacation this time of year. So who could ask for anything more, right? So in theory, that all sounds pretty good, but I am utterly amazed at how hard most of us work to relax. Have you noticed that about us? We are people on a mission, though it's hard to know exactly what our mission is most of the time. If there's any doubt about any of this, you should go to Stop and Shop in Point Pleasant Beach on a Friday or a Saturday afternoon in the summertime. Oh my. People come here to relax and be on vacation, and they are distracted and angry and in a hurry, and it's a very crazy scene. It's almost violent. It's violent grocery shopping. We live our lives at a pace that can best be described as frantic. Most days, we manage to multitask ourselves into oblivion and into utter exhaustion. We're held hostage by our over-communicating but under-relating lifestyle. We find little time for the little things, the really important ones, like loving God and loving the people who are supposed to be closest to us. Our days and weeks and months and years go flying by in a blur of frenetic hyperactivity. And clergy types are certainly not immune to being sucked into the black hole of our crazy, hazy, daisy lifestyle. Mea culpa, for sure. But with its long, gentle days and quiet mornings and sweet-smelling afternoons and cool evenings, summertime is a perfect time to renew or to begin a regular practice of Sabbath. Now notice that I didn't say it was a perfect time to observe Sabbath, or a perfect time to perform Sabbath, or a perfect time to do Sabbath. Because Sabbath is not about observing or performing or doing. Sabbath is about being. It's about resting. It's about being still before God. Because we should not have to work in order to rest. Most of the world's great religious traditions advocate frequent and regular times of stillness, periods of time to set aside to simply dwell in the presence of the divine, to be with the source of our being, to gaze upon the awesome beauty of the mystery most of us call God. I think our gospel reading today is a 2,000-year-old story about exactly that. So Jesus is staying in Bethany, as he apparently did quite often, with some of his very best friends, Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus. Martha is bustling about, working hard to welcome their dear friend from Nazareth. Maybe she's cooking, maybe she's cleaning, she could be doing the laundry. We don't actually know exactly what she was doing, but presumably she did, and she was getting pretty peeved that her sister Mary was not helping at all. Instead, Mary was, quoting, sitting at the feet of Jesus listening to what he was saying, end quote. That's a fascinating detail, really, because that posture of sitting at the feet of a teacher and listening to their wisdom, that was the posture of a disciple. And in that culture and society, disciples were exclusively men, but not for Jesus, which is a pretty wonderful and fascinating thing. Anyway, Martha asked Jesus to intervene on her behalf. And then he's no help either. Martha, Martha, you're worried about many things. There's need of only one thing, Jesus says. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. So Martha's probably sitting there thinking, great. Thanks a lot, Jesus. You're a big help, too. But Jesus was pointing out a truth that is so deep, it can easily be missed, and often is, even by us. Mary wasn't just sitting and listening to and gazing at some fly-by-night itinerant preacher from Nazareth. She was absorbed in contemplation of the highest order, not because of who she was, but because of who Jesus is. The paragraph that we heard from Paul's letter to the Colossians is believed by scholars to actually be a very early Christian hymn to the divinity and the omnipresence of Christ. Listen to how many times the phrases all things or everything are used in just 5 short lines of verse. Paul writes, Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in all things. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. And through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether in heaven or on earth, by making peace through the blood of his cross. All things, all things, all things, all things. It goes on and on. There are 8 phrases of totality and completeness and inclusivity in just this short, beautiful verse. In another translation that I read from, there are actually 11 of them. 11. So the bottom line is that even though Mary chose the one thing necessary, she actually chose the one in whom all things are held and loved and redeemed and reconciled to God. Mary chose to have it all by choosing the one Christ. And we can do the same thing. We can. Most of the world's great religious traditions advocate frequent and regular times of stillness, periods of time set aside to simply dwell in the presence of the divine, to be with the source of our being, to gaze upon the awesome beauty of the mystery most of us call God. There is nothing else in our human experience that so connects us to ourselves and others as connecting ourselves to the one from whom we all came and to whom we will all return. It has long been said that if you look deeply enough into the present moment, you can see eternity. If you look deeply enough into the present moment, you can see eternity. And so it is. But we have to stop long enough to look. About 10 years ago, Anthony and I were blessed to be able to visit the Holy Land with a group of other Episcopalians. I've talked about it a lot. While we were there, we decided to explore the beautiful old city of Jerusalem several times. One such time was on a Saturday. It was the Jewish Sabbath. Yeah. Most of the old city was bustling with crowds and tourists and noise and street vendors and shopkeepers and birds and goats and craziness. Without realizing the boundaries of the various quarters of the old city, we wandered into the Jewish quarter. And it was like crossing a line into another world. All the shops and the stores and the restaurants were closed. The streets were empty and still, very still. We could actually hear the soft sounds of the birds singing. We could hear children laughing in the distance. The only people we saw were families who were strolling through the streets, smiling and talking quietly, holding hands and walking together, nodding and waving pleasantly as their neighbors as they passed by. It was so beautiful and so peaceful. in trying to replicate some of that peace, I have a Sabbath practice that draws on the wisdom of our Jewish brothers and sisters. I observe my personal Sabbath on a midweek day, because of course as a Christian clergy person, I work every Sunday, right? And most Saturdays, and a lot of other days besides. But my personal Sabbath day every week is when I don't set an alarm clock. I don't turn on my computer. I don't go shopping, clean house, or do any errands. Martha would be appalled. Most times I don't even drive my car. And I certainly don't do anything that could qualify as work. I do sleep and read and walk and sing and pray and do yoga and eat and meditate and nap and listen to music and spend lots of time outdoors. And my favorite Sabbath practice of all is that I sit outside somewhere and I look at the earth or the sea or the sky and I simply gaze at God, which gives God a perfect opportunity to simply gaze at me, because I'm standing still for a change. And I am renewed by being held in the loving gaze of our infinitely loving God. I'm renewed in the image of my Creator. I'm reminded that I am one with the beautiful mystery that most of us call God. And that seems pretty perfect, because we should not have to work in order to rest. We really can have it all, but only one thing is necessary. One thing is necessary to have it all. And as Psalm 43 says, be still, and know that I am God. So Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to end by playing just a little piece of chant for you all. And I would just ask that we hold silence. It's very short. I know silence is a little hard in church sometimes, but we should have more of it. So I'll play a chant, and then I'll just say amen at the end of the chant, and we'll go on. So thank you. Thanks for that. I'm so sorry. Patience. It worked at the 8 o'clock. Let's see what we can do. All right, this is what is known liturgically as winging it. So this is a beautiful chant that's written by Sister Kathy Sherman, who is a sister of St. Joseph. So I will try just to sing it to you. God help me. So just close your eyes and hopefully God will give me a voice.